She's still laughing.
That's so funny. Welcome to 5 Lemons Left. We're the real stuff, the lemons making lemonade. So pucker up, because we're going to be discussing our life's lessons and the nitty-gritty details of our spiritual journeys.
Hey y'all, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Drusilla.
I'm Melissa.
Hello, this is Morgan.
And I'm Penny. Welcome to our podcast today.
Oh, welcome everybody. Welcome everybody.
Cracking ourselves up.
Yes, we are. Telling jokes we don't even understand, but we're still laughing. It's kind of like our topic today. We're talking about boundaries and spiritual growth. And sometimes we don't even understand what that means. And so we're going to have a conversation about what boundaries look like in this spiritual journey that we're on, how they've changed over time from I'm not going to be a doormat to swinging the other way to there's only love in the world. So all kinds of things. We're just going to talk through it together because parts of it we don't understand ourselves. So Morgan has volunteered to kick us off today.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's an interesting topic, and it's one that has always caused a little bit of a cloud of confusion for me because, as I was in a codependent relationship with an alcoholic for 12 or 13 years, one of the terms that comes up over and over and over again is about establishing and enforcing boundaries, but none of the literature, no person has ever been able to adequately demonstrate to me, what does that mean? How do you do it? Give me a tangible example of what that looks like. I always look like, okay, you're telling me I need to do this, but how is it done? Show me what that looks like. So it's a very interesting topic. One thing that really resonated with me towards the end of that period of my life was an article that said something like, you have to, the biggest boundary that you have to put into place is to just love yourself enough to recognize that someone who's in an active addiction cannot love you. So cannot love you and treat you the way that you deserve to be treated. And so it just highlighted for me that it really was a great act of lack of self-love to continue to remain in that relationship. And I don't think people want to drill it down to brass tacks like that for you, because then it sounds very black and white. Anyway, that is a tangent. I'm not sure how it ties back into our conversation about boundaries. But that's just sort of what came up for me right offhand. So
Morgan, you made a great point, loving yourself enough. Say that again. Say that part again.
Yeah, it's not an act of self-love to remain in a relationship with someone who is actively demonstrating that they're not capable of loving themselves or you in the way that you deserve and are worthy of receiving that love.
Yeah.
So in that case, then would a boundary be to leave a person?
I think so.
What came up for me when she was talking, so the first, if we're going to name the principle of boundary, right, is loving yourself enough to whatever, someone finish that sentence for me. That would be loving yourself enough to
Mm-hmm.
remove yourself from the situation.
Yes. exactly. It's not about trying to change the other person. That was what became clear to me. I
Yeah.
didn't need to continue to try to fix my husband or address his drinking or change him. And I didn't have to stop loving him. Like, love didn't have to come out of the equation. Like, it's all of those things are not mutually exclusive. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Yep.
It does.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So sometimes in that type of situation, doesn't it become conflicting to describe love and compassion and not being with that person? I mean, doesn't that because we're taught that things like that, if a person is not in control of it, then it is a sickness or an illness. And then do you not feel guilty or that you are judging them if you can no longer be with them? I'm just speculating based on that's just what comes up for me. Based on the things that I've heard people talk about in those types of situations. My situations have been probably less in terms of a sickness or illness, more of a behavior. And then you can justify that, they then are choosing to act this way. So therefore, I can choose to just walk away. But I think I've heard people kind of describe it as, you wouldn't walk out on someone if they had another kind of physical illness. So why then would you walk out if it's this type of illness? Does that make sense?
But you
Yeah.
would have boundaries, even if someone had, let's say someone had Alzheimer's and you had to take care of an ailing parent. You wouldn't necessarily walk out, but you would say, okay, I need help. I don't work at nights because then I'm no good. You'd have some boundaries, right? And so there would be boundaries in that. So even if someone is sick, you have the opportunity to have boundaries. And you have the opportunity to say, like, let's, like, going back to an alcoholic in your life, I don't want you drinking at home. I can't have you drinking at home. So let's say that's a boundary for your own personal health. Instead of like, you're just going to leave that person, I think you have the right to have that boundary.
That just what you were
Sure.
just saying, Melissa, too, about that. When I first met my husband, he smoked and I don't. And it felt like I was kissing an ashtray. And so I told him, if he smokes, I am not kissing him. I will not kiss you because I'm not going to kiss an ashtray. And so he quit smoking. So yeah, that was a boundary I set.
Yeah.
Just said, no, can't do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what if he didn't stop, or what if
so then I told him he had to like brush his teeth or do some mouthwash or something because I don't want to taste cigarettes when I'm kissing somebody. So that's what we had agreed to, but he just decided to quit instead. And that was great.
Yeah. Yeah. And like for me with my husband, it was similar to that example you just gave, Melissa. Like he had been on a bender that he had been trying to come out of. And he just couldn't get himself out of it. He was like on day 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, I don't know, of tapering off is what he called it. And we had checked him into a facility and he had checked himself out like an hour later. And so we had been to the emergency room. I don't know if I should be divulging all of this on the podcast, but it was like a whole deal. And then, but he was sobering up and we were preparing to go on our RV road trip. It's a huge commitment, a big change in our lives. And it bore a ton of stress with it. And then he came home and showed up wasted after like we had been inching our way out of that. And I had already put in a boundary, like you just described, Melissa, of no more booze around me in our home, in the RV. Like that was a boundary so when he showed up that last time was a last straw. And ultimately me enforcing that boundary, I think it was the kick in the rear end that he needed. And so in a way, it was an act of love, even though I'm sure he wouldn't describe it that way or see it that way.
Mhm.
And also, it's not really loving to stay with someone that you're constantly wishing and hoping will change, because then you're not loving and accepting them exactly as they're choosing to show up in the world. And we know that all paths are perfect. So by me saying like, okay, I'm going to choose to love and accept John Mark for exactly how he's choosing to show up. And I recognize that how he's choosing to show up does not align with my values and the way I'm interested in living my life. So it was an act of self-love, and it was an act of love to John Mark, because I was no longer trying to change him. I was just willing to love and accept the perfection of what he was choosing in that moment, what he demonstrated he was interested in. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it makes a lot
Perfect
of sense.
sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
If we're going to go with, the first principle in boundaries is self-love, right?
Mhm.
That's what you were demonstrating. And then I guess the second principle of boundaries would be non-judgment.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because I love what you said. Like you loved him as he was, not trying to change or fix. That's the biggest.
Yeah.
That's the biggest
Mhm.
thing.
it goes right back to Linda's story about the smoothies with her mom,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
week's episode.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, it's so interesting. Like I can think of no specific example comes up, but in my mind, like being at work, like, like something like people gossiping at work, when I decided I didn't want to be a part of that anymore. Like my first thing that I did was like put up a boundary, but I did it with judgment. I'm like, they're gossiping and I'm better than that. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it didn't feel good.
Mhm.
And I felt lonely, right? Because like nobody's talking to me now because I don't gossip anymore. Yeah. And then I had to get to the point where like of non-judgment, right? That's who they are. That's what they're doing, and not necessarily labeling what they're doing as right and wrong, but loving my energy enough to not be a part of it is a more gentle way to establish that boundary. And I'm sure there's
Mhm.
all kinds of things. Love yourself and non-judgment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what if you are working and you're not a server anymore, but what if you were a server and someone literally touched your ass?
Yeah. Huh.
Or maybe you can ask her if that happened.
Not this go around, but I have been in situations where people touch my ass and it felt dirty. And looking back on it, like my wish I would have decked them. I really wish that I would have had enough self-love for myself to punch them in the throat, which doesn't sound loving, but it is. Right?
Right.
It is.
I mean, that's really like literally a physical boundary.
It's a physical boundary. Yes.
and it's something that you can't love away. You can't like, oh, he just meant, I don't think he meant that the wrong way. You can't like non-judge it and love it away. So you're faced with having to have a boundary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is, to me, like a boundary that you enforce.
That would be an enforcement, right? And even if I didn't turn around and punch him in the throat, like I would expect the owner of the business, right? I go straight for the throat. The owner of the business to like make that person leave, right? I would ask for help, right? That is not allowed. That is, you shouldn't touch me. You need to go. You need to leave immediately. Mm-hmm.
So when you were younger, you didn't have that boundary.
I didn't, because I didn't learn physical boundaries. I think I've talked about it before. Like I didn't realize that my body was a sacred temple. The society, the environment that I grew up, like how I learned about sex and all, there were no boundaries. There were none. So I learned about physical boundaries and sexual boundaries in retrospect, right? So like, I'm like, oh, I was too young for that. Mm-hmm. Should have done that, right? So the whole physical boundary got a little warped for me. Mm-hmm. So now as I get older, like I'm like, ooh, okay, that wasn't right. That wasn't appropriate. Did not realize that, so that's the physical boundaries are completely different.
Well, yeah. I have a question just to spin it.
Yeah.
Have you or you, Melissa, or anybody ever smacked anybody on the ass?
Yeah. That's my love language, Morgan.
But not a stranger at a bar.
No.
Oh yes.
One of my friends says a hug without an ass grab is a handshake. Which is like,
I love that.
Don't have to be your friends, Yeah. To be your friends. There's some boundaries.
Oh gosh, that's funny. That was funny.
Yeah. So it does so boundaries for me is a journey. I'm just getting to the point where I can like say no, like it not necessarily physical stuff anymore, but if someone is, I don't even have an example right now, but I'm getting to the point where I love myself enough to like allow the little alarm bells to go off. So go back to work. Like, this time around when I had, I remember someone asking me if I could cover a shift for them and it was my anniversary. And I'm like, nope. Before I would have like, let me see if I can, blah, blah, blah. When at work, when they wanted me to do management stuff or the key or count the drawer or something that, I was not going to do, I was able to say no. Right. And that's where my own self-love and what I valued started to change without, judging whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that boundaries have to start with, I've always learned that boundaries are for me. They're not really for anybody else. They're for me. And so I've been practicing boundaries with myself, like being in bed by 10 o'clock at night so that I get enough sleep, because I'll stay up and think I have to keep working. But it's like, no, Penny, it's time to go to bed. You need your sleep. You need your rest. And so I think boundaries can be just with ourselves too. Just doesn't have to be with the guy who's slapping us on the ass. Mm-hmm. I think I've had a tough time really understanding boundaries and what they are, because when I grew up, there were no boundaries. I mean, we were told what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And if we didn't do it, there was hell to pay. And so as an adult now, I'm not there anymore, obviously. So I get to decide. And that's been a big journey for me as well, that I get to decide how life can be. And it doesn't have to be on somebody else's terms. Yeah.
And you get to decide what your preferences are.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've been taking a compassion course by Tom Bond, and he says, and I believe this, that everybody, no matter what they're doing, everybody's trying to get a need met. And so, yeah. So if I can look at everything that's occurring to me or around me or to me, just think about, okay, I wonder what need they're trying to get met right now, and just kind of being an inquiry and curiosity. And that helps me kind of stay out of judgment too.
Oh, I love that, Penny. It just brought me back to why I was feeling conflicted last week because of that exact thing, the compassion versus your boundary, in which I think yeah, when it's grand and in your face, it's a little easier to make those calls. But when it's more subtle and someone actually really does have a need, it does become a little challenging to balance. And I specifically can think of something that happened recently with a friend of mine who's going through a crisis, and she's pretty talkative in general. But now that she's going through the crises, she needs a lot of attention. And so, she may call me early in the morning, and then she'll call 2 or 3 times throughout the day. And number one, I don't really like talking on the phone that much. And number two, I try to protect my space and my peace, right? So I have grappled with that a lot lately, and just really wanting to be there for her, understanding her needs, but at the same time wanting to protect my space, my boundaries, and my peace. And it just really becomes really a conflict for me. And not so much when I do answer her, of course, but when I don't. And I think, well, what if she really needs something this time? And sometimes I will send her a text and say, hey, I can't talk right now. Is everything okay? And that typically does work. But what I was hoping would happen is if I did that more often, then she would say, oh, I don't want to intrude so much, so I won't call so much. But it doesn't seem to work that way. So that's a little bit of a more subtle thing. I do have the time to talk to her sometimes, but it's just, I guess, more of a preference.
When you talk about that, Drusilla, when I first started my 12-step work in Al-Anon, my outreach calls are a big, important thing when you're doing your own 12-step recovery. And my sponsor had me doing 3 phone calls a day to build up my support network. So I'm not just dependent on one Drusilla for everything, that I have an Amanda, a Morgan, a Melissa, and a Drusilla, and maybe 5 other people for my support to be able to support me when I'm in crisis. And so I said, I am too freaking busy to do this. Like, I'm a busy woman. I can't make all these phone calls. And so she said, they only have to be 3 minutes. And you can just set it up in advance. When you call the person, say, I'm just going to talk for 3 minutes. And then I don't want to take up too much of your time. And then I would be watching my clock. And when 3 minutes came, I'd say, thank you so much for taking my call. I really appreciate it. And then I would hang up. So I don't know the reason why I'm sharing that story is because maybe you can set a boundary with her of how much time you spend on the phone. And that might help. You can say, okay, you get 3 minutes now, go. And I'm setting a timer. And when it's done, we're done. I know it's hard when somebody's in crisis, but just having, I guess the moral of that story is just having that support group so that when when Drusilla's not available, maybe Morgan or Amanda or Melissa are for me, and I can call any one of them at that time. And so I just wanted to share that little story that's been helpful in my life.
I do like that. And I think that's me not setting that boundary to not do that. And there's been oftentimes that I would think, oh, well, I'm sure this time she won't keep me on the phone for an hour. And then it ends up being an hour. And then she'll still call back in the afternoon, and sometimes I really don't mind. And I think that's why I didn't put the boundary there. I'm like, okay, I mean, this crisis is really major and I would want someone to be there for me, but it does feel invasive at times.
In Al-Anon, there's a saying, detach with love and not amputation. So don't let it get to amputation, Drusilla.
I like that.
I do too.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, sometimes it gets to the point where we just can't take the phone calls anymore. And we just say, cut them out of your life. And so, that's where boundaries come in probably early on. Go ahead, Morgan. I'm sorry.
Well, I just really resonate with this situation that Drusilla is describing, because I have at least one friend who is not in crisis, but she is a talker. And I was watching an Aaron Abke thing on Instagram the other day, and he talks about the energetics of giving and receiving in relation to conversation, which I'd never looked at it in that way. And so she gets in a conversation with me, but it's not a conversation. It's an hour long, this girl speaking to me. And there's no opportunity for me to give. And it feels draining. It feels exhausting. And I know that she feels some kind of way about the fact that we don't talk on the phone more often, because I haven't established clear, healthy boundaries with her. So I have not been loving for myself or for her. And I do really value this friendship, but people don't pick up on subtleties. Drusilla, you were saying,
I see.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. So this is good for me to hear. Like, I need to establish a healthy, loving boundary. I need to detach with love, not amputation, as you said, Penny.
Sometimes it just feels easier just to dip, right? Like, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah.
But that is like, and sometimes for a boundary that's necessary. And, the path that we're on, the spiritual journey, like this is a spiritual podcast. So that's why we're having this discussion.
But, I sometimes think that it's confusing if we just cut people out of our lives for them, not that we have to worry about other people's journey. And we don't want to go into explanation, because explanation is a barrier to peak performance. It's just, when you were saying that, Amanda, I just want to cut them out, like they're done. I just think about my daughter, my oldest daughter's in a situation where she's had a friend that she lived with in college, but she's just done with her. She can't take her. She, like your friend Drusilla, who calls up in crisis, and she just said, you know what, I need a break from you. And she just broke it. And her friend is very confused and reaching out to her still and saying, I don't understand what I did wrong. And I think sometimes it's maybe a mature thing to let them know that XYZ, it's just, I can't handle all your crisis or whatever. I don't know. I'm really just reaching this out with you right now, and I'm open to any suggestions that you might have.
Yeah, I think it goes back to your think. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it important? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
Yeah,
and it may not initially seem kind, but it's more kind than not telling them. So I think it does check that box, even if it feels deeply uncomfortable for us.
So you're saying it's kind to tell them what's going on and why you need to take a break from the relationship?
I think so. And I think it would be kind for me to tell my friend the reason I don't make more of an effort to have phone conversations with her. Like it doesn't seen by the world's metric, like that would be a kind thing to do, but I think it actually is.
So what would that sound like?
Right? What was that?
I want to know.
Because
Hello, friend.
and people probably wouldn't believe that I have this problem because I seem like I'm really clear with my boundaries. Wouldn't y'all think so?
Yeah.
But I just don't know what that looks like. Amanda. I don't know. I've thought about it, but I have not been able to find the right words to say to her to leave her whole, but to set the boundary. I think I will. I just have not been able to come up with the right words yet.
You got anything, Melissa?
Well, I always know that when I speak from I feel this, I feel that. I'm not attacking someone. I'm not saying all you do is call me and you just talk and talk and talk. And you don't ever let me say anything. That is an attack that lets them then be ready to attack, defend or attack, right? Mm-hmm. But when I can say, I feel overwhelmed sometimes when I am on the receiving end of a lot of conversation, or even I would like a more balanced relationship when we talk on the phone. I also need someone to talk to, Morgan, like with your friend. So I think it is how not to make them wrong, but to tell them how you
need. Yeah, what we need, right?
Yeah. Which is a boundary, which is what I'm hearing on all these, everyone talking is when we were younger or when I was younger, my boundaries, if I had any, were like slip sliding away. They were just not there, or they were there and then they were gone. And as I have grown up more, I can have boundaries that make things feel good for me. Like you just don't feel good when you're just being talked at on a phone call. Mm-hmm. And you're the only lifesaver and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think as we grow older, or wiser, or myself, I'll talk for myself. My boundaries are more about keeping my peace, maintaining my peace, keeping my peace, keeping my feet on the ground, not getting hooked in where I would usually get hooked in the past, or whatever, that kind of thing. And I think it can be delivered very kindly. Taking someone out of the equation it's not you, it's me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it would be so loving to say, I really value our friendship and I would love to talk to you more, but I can't do hour-long conversations that feel one-sided. Like if we could talk with more frequency and keep them to like 15 minutes, then we could connect more than we are, currently. I don't know if that is the best way to say it, but demonstrating that you do value them and value the friendship would be another loving way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How do you feel, Drusilla?
I definitely value the relationship. It's fairly new by my standards. Most of my friends are from middle school or, from 15, 20 years. So this is 3-4 years. And I do value how far we've come to this point, but it is overwhelming. Mm-hmm. It is overwhelming.
And it's like if she's actually dumping her stuff on you, mm-hmm. then yeah. And
I think that's why it's probably more challenging because it is new. Of course, if I knew someone for 10 years, I would be like, hey, girl, I gotta go.
Yeah, Yeah.
Totally. And it's understood and no feelings are hurt, you know.
Mhm.
So I think that makes it a little more sensitive, and that she is already that sensitive, and everybody
Mhm.
around her is being, you know, not so kind and not so nice. And so it's just a you know, a hodgepodge of things. And yeah. And to be honest, it's hard not to let those thoughts run in your mind like, well, that's probably because they don't have hours to sit up with you on the phone that you feel they're dissing you. Like, it's
Mhm.
not to have those thoughts too, right? So
Mhm.
then that's why I haven't said anything yet, because I really want to be clear in my presentation to her and loving about it when I do respond.
So Morgan, in your thank you, Drusilla. It just, my mind went back to like the most loving thing. Like, how do you respond the most loving way? Because Morgan, when you said I don't, but it's one-sided, or so, I don't remember what the words you said. That sounded judgmental, right? So how do you have a conversation about boundaries without judgment?
Can I just insert one thing here? So what I learned is that when you say something like, I really value our relationship, but then everything you just said was a lie, is what I learned.
Yes.
And so I really value our relationship, but I would like to blah, 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 blah. So I just watched the butts and not smack, you know?
Don't smack them.
Don't smack
Back around to the ass.
Yeah, it was back to the ass.
So you started this.
Yeah.
Back to the butts.
Go ahead, Morgan. Amanda was talking to you, but I just wanted to insert that.
Yeah. That's the same thing. We were saying the same thing in a different way, Penny.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that is, I don't know the loving way to address the one-sided nature of the conversation. Like, I think like for me, it feels important if I'm going to address this head on to express that I do value the friendship, and express, I tell the story that I'm not a phone person all the time to Drusilla. That's been my lifelong story. And express that the hour-long conversations drain me. But that does just gloss over the fact that the conversations are one-sided. So I am not real clear on the loving way to address that piece.
Would it be loving to, I value your friendship. I don't like being on the phone. So 15 minutes feels more comfortable for me. And it would also, like, could we take turns sharing?
Yeah.
One week is, or one time is my turn. The next time is your turn.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't even know if I would fill up 15 minutes. Like, I just prefer dialogue. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're interested in all the same things. Like, let's just have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it feels like she's like telling me things that she thinks I don't know, like she's educating me or something. And it's,
Morgan, it sounds like you're a lot like me in that way, in a lot of these aspects. And what I've gotten out of that before, because even some people who don't do that to me consistently, like she does, like some of my nieces, they will call me and do that. They'll stay on the phone for an hour, and then all I say is, "Oh, really? Oh, yeah, okay," and that's it. But what they have explained to me is that it's because I'm the best listener.
Mm.
I'm the best listener. I don't judge them. I don't correct them. I don't tell them what to do when it's all said and done. And I did think about that with the friend as well. So all of these aspects, I guess, I need to address, right? Because it's all still the same, that I'm not setting clear boundaries.
So let me throw a wrench in the system here at the very end of our call, because we're coming to the end of our time. So how does the working in the one mind, the unity of all life, how does that work in boundaries. Something to think about that we could pick up next time.
I just want to say, I think it can go back to preferences. I think you can be really, a boundary could just be really like, I would prefer to talk on the phone on Tuesdays. I personally, I don't talk on the phone after like 4 or 5, because I feel like I'm doing, on the computer and stuff. I feel like my brain is jello by that point. So I let myself relax and I very rarely answer the phone. And if someone asks me, I just would say, I prefer it. It works for me not to talk after 4 or 5. And, or I would prefer it if we could have when we talk, that we both could share and have more of a dialogue. Because that's not saying that something's wrong with that person. That's just saying what you would like.
That sounds really good, Melissa. Just the way you presented it.
Yeah. What a perfect way, what a perfect example of expressing healthy boundaries. Thank you, Melissa.
Are you making a boundary right now that we have to get off this call?
Clear.
Lovingly.
Very clear.
Your preference.
Yeah. Hopefully I'm doing it lovingly.
And you are.
Yeah. So any final thoughts before Morgan takes us away? All right, Morgan.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us again today. It's so good to have all 5 of the Lemonettes back together this week. And we just would invite you to check out our website, download episodes wherever you listen to podcasts, just to help with the metrics of all of that, which I don't fully understand. Like, share, save, reviews would be the most helpful. And talk to us on Instagram or Facebook. Let us know what you want us to talk about, what would be helpful or interesting. And we look forward to seeing you again in 1 week. We love you. Thank you.
So I have 2 Penny's Post-its.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
And it's sloppy, but preferences are loving boundaries, and boundaries are an act of self-love.
Yay.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you, Penny.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Have a great week.